This is your daily briefing. You're most welcome to it. It's heating up. It's getting ugly. Spurs can't publish anything on their social media channels without getting absolutely battered. I'm happy enough because I've maintained for a long time, since I started working online, which is coming up for 20 years itself, that this was the wrong model and it was the wrong people and the fit wasn't right. And so any deterioration of Enic's position, I welcome. But I think a lot of this is after the horse has bolted. You should have made a fuss before they bulldozed White Hart Lane, perfectly serviceable stadium, and the money should have been put into the football club all along. But I'll come back to that. Let's kick off with Dan Kilpatrick. Now, this is a queer one, if you ask me. The tone of this you're going to find a little bit strange because it certainly deviates from what he publishes in the Evening Standard, and it is buried in Yahoo Finance, which is no dark arts on behalf of Kilpatrick. Writers of his stature, his profile is perhaps a better word to use, produce content, and people like PA Sport, ESPN, there's a whole plethora of these guys, and they'll take a couple of thousand words off you. It's a lucrative little side hustle. So that's why it's there anyway in Yahoo Finance, and it's not on the Evening Standard. Conte is refusing to commit to the club beyond the end of the season and maintains the air of a coach who is concerned above all with managing his own reputation while he waits for a better offer. Naivety in extremeness for me, I have to say. I think he is managing his own reputation because that's all he has to go home to when this is over. But look, this is written by, in my grotesquely hurtful language, a child. So what do you expect? If you have a very narrow, limited worldview, then this is how you might see things. But let's go on. Perhaps Conte's wavering on his future is part of a clever strategy to keep Levy on his toes, but it makes it almost impossible for the club to fully buy into his vision and leaves the constant preaching about the need for patience and time feeling hollow. Again, the reason he's talking about patience and time is because he knows he doesn't have the resources, doesn't have the personnel to do the job properly, and that's the whole point. And if you can't see that, then the nastiest thing I can say to you is I feel sorry for you. There is also the question of whether Levy will maintain an appetite to continue down an uncertain road with such a high maintenance coach who could walk away at any minute. Excuse me. Well, yeah, sure, there is that. But this is showing a blind devotion to somebody who has been remarkably unsuccessful in this industry. And let me just make a small brief note here for you, for those of you finding it tough to catch up. Borrowing large amounts of money and not winning anything but building infrastructure. I'm sorry, I'm waiting for the round of applause, the whooping and the cheering, which a lot of you were doing while they were building the stadium, incidentally. Don't forget, I haven't forgotten about you. So the patience and time is because not just his hands are tied together, but his shoelaces are tied together. The whole thing's a fiasco. And he is the first one that's actually called it out. Spurs and Conte always felt like a strange marriage, but so far it has largely worked, and this season could still be a hit if you're 12. Plainly, though, the partnership can only be successful in the long term if both the manager and the club are fully committed to each other. Well, I think the real issue there is not whether that partnership is committed to each other, but whether the business model. And I know that sends some people to sleep when we talk about these things, but the priority of this club has never been football. What I get here from Dan is the fact that he's scared of his employers and thinks that Tony should be fearful of his also. And I say this goes back to having a narrow and poor worldview, and that's why we get these opinions. But as poor as they are, as misguided as they are, this isn't being aggregated through the usual mechanics online. And so therefore, it's a little bit more of his truth is coming out, if that makes sense. Yeah, his truth is what he believes, what he perceives, what he understands. I think he's wrong, but I think this is a massive fork in the road from the Spurs are interested in Franck Kessie and Pedro Porro garbage that these guys just churn out relentlessly. And then we get, Exhibit B, Alistair Gold. And he tells us in his column that he was kept waiting for an hour after the Villa game, which appears to have weighed heavily on his ability to type the truth for us. Conte is accused of being manipulative and hypocritical and someone who's actively blocking the path of youth players to the first team. What a bad man. So that means we won't get another Harry Winks anytime soon, because everybody else that's come through from anything vaguely associated with the academy has come through us after they've been loaned out and they've had the edges taken off them. The academy is a flawed enterprise. It doesn't produce anything. And I've got to say, the academy has fallen away during the time that Conte's been with us. And I think that reflects his lack of interest in it because he sees it for what it is. I think it needs a fundamental makeover, if that makes sense. But I think prior to that, it was always revered because we had all these, and I've got to, look, I talk how I talk, and if you don't like it, switch me off, it's, you come here, that's the way this works. But we had these parasites like Windy Coys, and there's a few others kicking about, but he was a notable, telling us how exciting all these young boys in tight shorts were. And they weren't exciting. And 99% of them you'd never hear of again. But we had this sort of unrelenting sort of undercurrent of people supporting people that were just names. And I've just discovered, this is the killer, I've just discovered on my scouting tools thing, I've actually got footage of some of this stuff. And it's dreadful. It is kids kicking a ball about in the local park. It's not very good. And how anybody could watch that and then with a big enough following on a big enough social media account and a blog that gets traffic and all the rest of it, twist this, shine this guano up and tell you that there were diamonds in there. Just beggars belief. But anyway, Gold continues. Daniel Levy is a media-shy workaholic, and the disconnect between he and the fans isn't his fault. I'm going to leave that there because I don't have anything nice to say about Daniel Levy. I don't think he's a force for good. I don't think football is his thing. I think genuinely, and I always use this phrase about him, which I'm sure grates on some, but this mother knows best business. And I think it was Sir Alex Ferguson that said that Daniel Levy was different. And some people latched onto that and thought it was a bit of anti-Semitism. Not in a million years. Ferguson comes from, he's cut from the same cloth as Shankly, from Nicholson, from Clough, and these are all football men. And Levy came in to this business, designed, his entire being was to be the antithesis of this. And he wasn't just going to be another football club chairman. And that's why he's thought outside the box, to use that dreadful phrase. We have this business where you borrow money, you create the infrastructure, and then you reinvest and blah, blah. But the reality is he's not been very good at it. In fact, he's been very poor at it. More from Gold here. There was a common theme in all his answers. The process needs more time. Don't expect anything exciting from his team. Last season was a miracle. He needs better and older players rather than younger players. He managed to say that indirectly quite a lot. More money needs to be spent, and Tottenham are not like the other clubs he's managed in his recent trophy-laden years. And this is the problem with Gold, and this is the problem with Kilpatrick. Youth is not on their side, it's working against them. Their worldview isn't there. They've never been out in the real world. They've never had proper jobs. I do them a terrible discourtesy because I've not read their CVs, but you can tell by the way they write and by the way they conduct themselves. And everything we've got here, which is slightly challenging, at worst mocking Conte, is actually the truth. We're the 10th richest club in Europe or the world or whatever it is, but we've got a ton of money. The process does need more time because he's walked into an absolute mess. It's a doer-upper at best. Last season was a miracle. It was a miracle because as we have done this season so far, except for now the wheels have fallen off because they haven't done anything sensible to improve the situation, managed to take points off of the deadbeat sides. I mean, Sonny scored his 3 goals against a Leicester City in freefall. He's been incapable of scoring against anybody else. Conte does need better and older players. A child could tell you that, except for these children can't tell you that, and that's the problem. And more money does need to be spent. And I am not somebody who is an advocate of just going bonkers spending money. Spending should be done in an informed fashion. The primary business of a football club is transfers. Yeah. It's not coaching. It's not coaching. And there are still people out there saying, oh, well, Conte should get a better tune out the squad he has. Yeah, and I want a bike for Christmas. But I'm not getting a bike because Dad's got no cash. Cash is king. And he has won trophies. I mean, this is the most damning element for me, that Gold says Tottenham are not like the other clubs he's managed in his recent trophy-laden years. Well, first of all, it's not recent. His entire career has been a success as a football manager, and he's won trophies because he's coached for sides that know the game. They know how to run a football club, and Daniel Levy does not. It comes as no surprise to me that these two clowns have fallen on the Enic side of the fence, and what we have here, in my view, is two extremely worthless individuals with terrifyingly poor world views. As I've said before, you'll have to forgive me, I use notes and I may repeat myself. Spurs have never been run primarily as a football club under this lot, and Levy has always known better. There are frustrations with Antonio Conte, and I totally get that. He's a flawed character. But newsflash, we all are. Highlighting whatever it is you don't like about Conte is deliberately missing the point, and many of you sheltered behind these personal issues that you had about Jose Mourinho. And what you should have done is put them to one side like a grown-up and kept the gun, the metaphorical gun, focused upon Levy and co. The rap sheet against Levy is as long as my digital archive. StubHub, the Y-word arrests, sacking a dozen of coaches, many of whom entertained us, just the one trophy in 22 years, and the utter interference in the stadium build. And I've got to tell you, I've spoken in the flesh, face to face, with people that were involved in the business where they said the fire panel thing had gone wrong. Total lie. Absolute lie. They bought the wrong bloody thing. They thought they were saving money and they had to rip it all out. And that cost hundreds of thousands of pounds. I've spoken to somebody who's involved in the robotic pitch thing. That's going to need to be revamped sooner rather than later. Mark 1 technology, it's already too slow, and there are going to be other problems moving forward. So where am I? Am I just here shouting Enic out and throwing stones? Well, kind of, but no. As I've said to you previously on numerous occasions, and I said to you again on this tape, the time for having a meaningful dialogue, and I come back to the Tottenham Hotspur Supporters Association because they were in on it as well. Nobody, it didn't cross anybody's mind, it struck me, to say, how are we paying for this? And it was all mother knows best, don't worry, Daniel's in charge, he's a brilliant businessman. And I just think he's brilliant at structuring loans, is what I think he's brilliant at. As I say, the stadium build, they interfered in that relentlessly. Speak to anybody who worked on the project. I've spoken to numerous people, as I say. Got to be careful what I say, because otherwise you give away who these people are. But they interfered within an inch of our lives and cost us hundreds of thousands of pounds. So the time for making a fuss, the time for, not making a fuss, but the time of intervening, of fans having a really meaningful voice has kind of come and gone. And so where am I? Well, I'm Enic out. Of course I am. But I just ponder this. I just throw this into the mix. What I'd like to do is for the serial losers to go, which is the Tottenham board, and for the serial winner to stay, because this is football. And don't tell me, oh, you're not playing Jed Spence, you're not playing Brian Gill, so you've got to go, because he's not in this. Him and Tony and Jose, these guys are in a different league to so many of the other managers that we've had in the past. And the idea of bringing Poch back is just utterly ridiculous, and just presumes that Poch is even further down the food chain than I have in my own mind about the man. We've reached a point where it's time to put a for sale sign on the front porch and let somebody else have a go. Enic have to understand that their situation is untenable, and it's not just thick football fans that are shouting we don't like you and worse. It's just that you've had a bloody long go of it and you've not done what we want you to do, and that's how football clubs work. Winning is the metric. Jam tomorrow is fine. but it doesn't last very long unless you're particularly stupid. And we've got two journalists there from big publications telling us that, there still could be jam tomorrow. So if you listen to them, you need your head looking at. And I've got to say it, it's coming. Anyone toying with the idea of telling me to be careful what I wish for, might want to consider that nobody in their right mind would wish for owners like this. And, it's very difficult to do these tapes, and I'm running over. I don't like going over the 10-minute mark. There's a bit of inside information for the last thing I want to do is chew your ear off for the wrong end of an hour and a half, 2 hours. But they never put any money into this concept, into this entire operation. They borrowed the money with which they bought the club. Do you get that? Do you understand that? Some of you don't. I'm joking, but I can see it in your faces. You don't understand. Go and do your homework. There's lots of search engines. Go and use one of them. They borrowed the money to get into this, and then they've borrowed. So they're very clever about the way they've done it. But what you don't get rewarded for is having to, produce this, but then it just hasn't worked within footballing terms. And the fans want to be entertained, and I think that's a primary thing. Some fans have been, over a period of time, I would suggest Arsenal fans, Manchester United fans, put up with the football being a bit but they won everything. And those win everything moments are what makes your heart sing, and what brings you into the whole thing. Because football absorbs us. And the disconnect, which they laugh off there and say, but he's a camera shy workaholic. I don't care what he is. I just want him out. And I don't say this in a fit of pique, but you don't give a man over 2 decades and then he demonstrates that he isn't fit for purpose, that he can't do the job, and then start mumbling about what's wrong with the latest manager. And listen, you don't send Jose Mourinho back. You might not like him. I don't care. Yeah, I don't care what you think of him, but you don't send him back. You don't sack him 6 days before a cup final. When you're starved as we are of success. And Conte, if you're going to start looking down your nose at him and mumbling about children, I think he's probably making some mistakes there. Yeah, I would, if I was on, like I said to you the other day, if I was on 15 mil and I had some bald lunatic saying to me to play somebody I didn't think was up to the task, do you know what? I'd play him and prove my point. And I think that's the way that people have been misreading a lot of Conte's selections over the last, for the entire season perhaps. Why is he playing Emerson Royal? Because he holds the training and he realises he's surrounded by deadbeats. Nobody asked for this stadium. That's the truth. Nobody asked for this stadium. I've got to say, when it was first pitched, I thought to myself, yeah, okay, I can understand that. Speculate to accumulate. They'd been in a situation where they wanted to expand White Hart Lane for quite a while, but it never really came off. But then what really killed it for me, and I was so much on my own, please hug me, please tell me it's going to be all right, but I was so on my own, the way they went about it. I mean, they operated like a mafia. The people at work in their private businesses, and there's this dunk, dunk, dunk at the door, and there's people stood there with a compulsory purchase order. And they weren't building a hospital. This wasn't to put kidneys or new eyeballs into babies. We need to sell more hot dogs. There you go. You're down the road a piece. And that to me really sucked. It sucked badly. And there was people out there, probably, hopefully not watching this, was so deranged they threw a petrol bomb into Archway Steel. Absolute pigs. Conte, he wants to coach a football club and he wants to win things. And do you know why he comes up with this crackpot notion? Because that's the way he's done it his entire career, the same as Mourinho. So the choice is yours. You can sit there and moan that Conte isn't the right guy because he's unprepared to play Jed Spence, which I kind of agree with you to a certain extent. Or you can factor in, instead of these little nitpicking exercises against Conte, and that's what they are, they're nitpicking, you can consider 22 years of abject failure, because learning how to juggle and borrow money, no round of applause from me for that. That's it for now. Good luck. Keep it on them.